The grand hall of the Vrylock Empire was filled with a heavy silence. Tall pillars of black crystal rose toward a ceiling that shimmered like liquid stars. Alien nobles stood on each side, their armor shining red under the twin suns. Each pair of glowing crimson eyes followed the same line of prisoners standing in the center, the captured humans. Among them stood Ethan Hale, a simple engineer from Earth. His uniform was torn, his hands rough with burns from the machines he once repaired. He wasn't a soldier, not a leader, not even someone important. He was just in the wrong place when the alien fleet had attacked. Now he stood in front of a throne carved from obsidian and bloodstone, the seat of the Vrylock Emperor, ruler of an empire that had crushed whole worlds. Beside him sat his daughter, Princess Valara of the Blood Suns, the one people whispered about in fear and awe. She was said to drink the life force of stars themselves, a being so old that even her own people spoke her name carefully. Her presence was both beautiful and terrifying. Her pale skin seemed to glow softly, and her long dark hair fell like ink over her silver armor. Her eyes, bright crimson, watched everything with quiet hunger and loneliness. When she breathed, the air seemed to tremble. Ethan tried not to look at her, but something in him was drawn. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was fascination. He didn't know. A deep, booming voice echoed through the hall. "The princess shall choose her consort," the emperor declared. "As our tradition demands, she shall select one among the conquered to bind her reign." The words made the other humans tremble. A consort, and everyone knew what that meant. The chosen one would be taken away, bonded for life to serve the princess. Most never survived long. Valara rose from her throne slowly, her cloak sweeping behind her like smoke. The nobles watched eagerly. The humans barely breathed. She began to walk along the line, her gaze sharp as a blade. One by one, she looked at each human. Some bowed their heads, some whispered prayers, some cried. But when she reached Ethan, she stopped. He lifted his eyes, not out of courage, but confusion. He expected her to move on, to pick someone stronger, braver, anyone but him. But she didn't move. She stared into his eyes, and in that moment, something inside her shifted. Her world, filled with centuries of cruelty and control, seemed to pause. He did not tremble. He did not kneel. He just looked at her like a person, not a goddess, not a monster, but something alive. Her voice, when it came, was soft but carried across the hall like thunder. "I desire this human as my husband." Gasps broke through the silence. The generals exchanged furious looks. The nobles whispered in disbelief. Even the emperor's eyes widened. Ethan froze. He thought he had misheard. Husband? Her husband? His throat went dry. He looked around, hoping someone would laugh, that it was a mistake. But she wasn't joking. She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "You will be treated with honor," she said quietly. "You belong to me now." Guards rushed forward, pulling Ethan away from the line. The other humans watched him with wide eyes, some pitying, some jealous, some terrified. As they dragged him toward her, Ethan tried to speak. "Wait, I didn't—" But her eyes silenced him. There was no anger there, only something deep and unreadable. The emperor rose slowly. "My daughter has chosen, so it shall be." Valara turned, her cloak sweeping behind her, and began to walk toward the tall crystal doors at the end of the hall. The guards followed, bringing Ethan behind her. As the doors closed, the last thing he saw was the crowd of alien faces staring in disbelief. He didn't know why she had chosen him. He didn't know what fate waited for him in her shadowed palace. But as the heavy doors sealed shut, he realized one thing. His life as an ordinary human was over, and whatever he was about to become, it would begin with the words of the alien vampire princess, who had pointed at him and claimed him as her own. Ethan woke to the soft hum of light. He was no longer in the hall, no longer surrounded by the whispers and stares of the alien nobles. Instead, he lay on a wide crystal bed in a chamber bathed in soft red light. The walls shimmered like liquid, reflecting the twin suns outside. The air smelled faintly of flowers and something electric, something alive. He tried to sit up, but his body felt strange, stronger, lighter. Yet, every muscle throbbed with pain he couldn't name. Panic surged. He glanced around, hoping to see a guard or someone who could explain what had happened, but the room was empty, except for her. Princess Valara stood near the window, her pale skin glowing in the red light, her dark hair falling like ink over her shoulders. She didn't move toward him, only watched. There was no threat in her stance, no malice. Only the quiet, calm presence of something far older and wiser than him. "You are safe," she said softly, her voice carrying a strange warmth. "No one will harm you here." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to understand. Safe? After what just happened? Why me? She turned to him fully, and the crimson glow of her eyes softened. "Because you looked at me differently. Everyone else bowed or trembled. Everyone else expected fear. But you looked confused. Not afraid. Not worshipful. Just human." He laughed nervously, a short, shaky sound. "I was terrified," he admitted. "I don't know what I did to deserve this." Her smile was faint, almost sad. "That is exactly why I chose you. Courage comes in many forms, human. Sometimes, it is in standing still when all else falls." Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. He had never heard words like that before, not from anyone. Not from family, not from friends. And certainly not from an alien princess who could crush him without effort. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. "Our traditions require a bond," she said, her voice lowering. "It is the way of my people. It will connect us. You will not be alone, but you must accept it." He nodded slowly, unsure, yet unable to refuse. There was something in her gaze, an unspoken plea, a trust that terrified him more than any weapon ever could. Valara extended her hand. It was cold, but not cruel. Ethan took it, and the moment their skin touched, a strange warmth spread through him. Her fangs barely grazed his neck, and pain and fire flared, but not enough to kill. He felt something, ancient, something powerful flow into him. Memories, feelings, centuries of loneliness and battles. He gasped, staggering back, but she held him gently. "Breathe," she whispered. "It will not kill you, but it will change you." And it did. He saw flashes of her life, the wars she had led, the planets she had conquered, the endless nights of solitude, the weight of an empire on her shoulders. He saw the girl behind the princess, lonely, longing, desperate for someone who could see her as she truly was. When the pain faded, he was trembling, not from fear, but from awe, from connection, from a strange understanding that had never existed before. Valara's crimson eyes softened as she reached out to touch his cheek. "Now we are linked," she said quietly. "Not just in body, but in life. Your heart and mine are connected." Ethan tried to speak, but words failed him. The world felt bigger, heavier, and yet, in her presence he felt lighter than ever. "Do you understand?" she asked, a faint smile touching her lips. He nodded slowly. I think I do. Somehow." She leaned closer, and for the first time, he felt the weight of her centuries pressing, not like judgment but like trust. A bond had been formed, fragile, terrifying, and yet beautiful. And in that quiet chamber, away from the fear of the hall and the whispers of the empire, Ethan realized that his life had truly changed. He was no longer just a human engineer. He was part of something far greater, something that could reshape not just him but the entire galaxy. Valara stepped back, letting him breathe, but her gaze never left him. Ethan felt it in his bones. Whatever lay ahead, whatever trials or battles awaited, he would face them with her, not as a prisoner but as a partner. And deep in his chest, a tiny spark of hope ignited, because for the first time he felt that someone, even someone from a distant star, had chosen him. Days passed, and Ethan slowly began to understand the strange new world he was part of. He no longer slept on a simple bed or ate simple meals. He was clothed in fabrics that shimmered like liquid night, and he walked the polished halls of the palace as though he belonged. Yet he never forgot who he was. A human far from Earth, far from home, standing in a palace that ruled over billions. Princess Valara remained close, but she was careful in public. Around the nobles, she wore her mask of authority and cold perfection. Around him, she was softer, almost fragile. She would show him her favorite places in the palace, hidden gardens, where the air was warm and fragrant, or corridors where the walls sang faintly with energy. In those moments, Ethan could see the girl behind the princess, the one who had lived centuries alone, who had never trusted anyone completely. But not everyone in the palace accepted him. Whispers followed him through the corridors. Soldiers glared, nobles muttered behind their hands. Humans who had been captured before him looked at him with envy and fear. Even some of Valara's closest advisors questioned why she had chosen a mere engineer. One night, as Ethan wandered a balcony overlooking the red-tinted city, he overheard voices that chilled him. "Half-blood human," one general hissed. "He weakens her. He cannot lead with her. He will destroy everything." "They should be eliminated," another said. Before the princess is blinded by affection, Ethan's heart pounded. He had survived the battle, the selection, the bond of blood. But now he realized there were those who would see him dead, simply because he existed. Valara appeared behind him silently as though she had been there all along. "You heard?" she said softly. He nodded, words failing him. "They want me dead." "Yes," she replied, her crimson eyes hardening but her hand brushing his shoulder in quiet comfort. "They think you weaken me. They do not understand that you remind me of what it means to be alive." Ethan swallowed, trying to find courage he wasn't sure he had. "Do you care what they think?" She turned fully toward him, the wind blowing her hair like a dark curtain. "I care about nothing more than truth and loyalty, and you?" "You are both." Her words stirred something in him. For the first time, Ethan realized that she had chosen him not as a symbol, not as a pawn, but as someone who mattered to her, someone who made her feel something she had not felt in centuries. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers. "Then let them hate me. I'd rather die as myself than live as their pawn." Valara's lips curved into a faint smile, tinged with sadness. "You are braver than any warrior in this palace," she whispered. "It is why I chose you. Even now they do not see it. But your presence reminds me of who I am. Not just a princess, not just an empress, but someone who can feel." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had never heard anyone speak to him like that. On Earth, people had underestimated him, ignored him, or expected him to fail. But here, in this alien palace, an immortal princess had chosen him for what he was. The city below shimmered under the twin suns. Lights sparkled across crystal towers, and energy ships moved like fireflies through the streets. And yet, for all the grandeur, Ethan knew danger waited in every shadow. Valara's hand found his, warm and firm. "We must be careful," she said. "They will strike soon. But know this, I will protect you as I swore, and you have a strength they do not see." Ethan met her gaze, and in that crimson light he felt a bond stronger than fear. He did not know what awaited him, or what horrors the future held, but for the first time he felt ready to face it, not alone but beside someone who believed in him. The whispers of rebellion echoed through the palace walls, but they no longer frightened him. Whatever storms were coming, he knew he would not face them as a human alone. He would face them as the one the alien vampire princess had chosen, her husband, her equal in courage and perhaps in the quiet strength of the heart. And in that moment, amidst the glittering towers and glowing suns, Ethan realized that life, even in the shadow of immortals, could still be his if he was willing to fight for it. The palace was alive with tension. Ethan could feel it in the corridors, in the faint hum of energy that ran through the walls and in the way the guards whispered among themselves. Something was coming, something dangerous. That night he awoke to distant explosions shaking the crystal halls. Red light flickered through the windows as alarms echoed across the palace. Panic was not in him yet. Disbelief came first. He ran to the balcony and saw the city in chaos. Loyal soldiers battled rebels in the streets below. Fires glowed like molten rivers and ships crashed into towers, their energy burning bright in the darkness. He had heard the whispers, the plotting. Now the rebellion had come alive. Valara was already moving. Her long cloak swept behind her as she drew energy blades from her belt. The crimson light dancing across her pale skin. She was a storm, beautiful and deadly, and the soldiers bowed only to get out of her path. "Ethan," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay close to me." He ran to her side, his heart pounding, his hands trembling. He had been trained only in machines in repair, not in combat. But he had no choice now. He could not flee. Not when she, the princess who had chosen him, was in danger. They moved through the palace, fighting their way toward the command chambers. Rebels attacked in waves, and Ethan felt his fear sharpen into something he had never known. Courage born from desperation. He swung weapons he barely understood, dodged strikes, and shielded Valara as best as he could. Then it happened. A general, one of the highest-ranking traitors, appeared ahead with a weapon aimed straight at her back. Time slowed. Ethan saw it clearly. If he did nothing, Valara would die. Without thinking, he leaped in front of her. The blast struck him square in the chest, sending him flying across the marble floor. Pain exploded in every bone and darkness began to close in. Valara screamed, a sound unlike anything Ethan had ever heard. It was fury, heartbreak, and disbelief all in one. She struck down the general in a storm of crimson energy that made the walls shake and the ceiling quiver. Every rebel within reach fell to her blades. Her eyes burned brighter than the suns themselves, yet when she turned to him there was fear in her gaze, deep and raw. She knelt beside him, holding his broken body. "No, no, not you," she cried, tears streaking her pale cheeks. "You were not meant to die for me. Not you, not my human." Ethan tried to speak, tried to assure her he was alive, but his strength was gone. Pain clouded his mind and his vision blurred. Valara's fingers trembled as she touched his lips. Then, without hesitation, she bit her wrist and pressed it to his mouth. Warm, strange energy flooded him, burning and soothing all at once. He felt his wounds knitting, his chest steadied, and something deeper, a connection, a bond, filling the empty places inside him. When he finally opened his eyes, the rebellion had scattered. Smoke curled through the halls and the scent of blood and fire was thick in the air. But he was alive. Valara's crimson gaze softened. "You should not have survived," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You carry my blood now, and that makes you strong, but it also ties you to me forever." Ethan felt the energy thrumming through him, strange and powerful, and for the first time he realized he was not just human anymore. He was something more, a being tied to her life, to her strength, and perhaps to her destiny. "Why?" he asked weakly, his voice hoarse. "Why save me?" Her hands cupped his face. "Because I chose you," she said simply. "Not for your strength, not for your skill, but for your heart. You remind me what it means to care, to live. That is worth more than any throne or army." Ethan's chest tightened. He had never felt this. Awe, fear, love, and relief all tangled together. And in that moment he understood. The rebellion was not just an attack on the palace. It was a test of their bond, a trial of courage. And he had survived. Valara's crimson eyes searched his, and he knew he would follow her anywhere. Fight with her, protect her because she had saved him. And he would never forget that. Not for a moment, not for a lifetime. Ethan woke slowly, the world around him spinning and glowing in strange red and silver hues. He was alive. His chest, which had been broken by the blast, was whole again. Pain lingered, a faint reminder of what had happened, but the fire that had consumed him was gone. He touched his chest in disbelief. He had survived what should have killed him, and it was her blood that had saved him. Valara was there, sitting silently on the edge of the bed, her hands resting in her lap. She looked more vulnerable than he had ever seen her, tired, exhausted from the battle, but still radiating an aura of power that made the air around her hum. Her crimson eyes softened as they met his. "You should not be alive," she said quietly. "No human ever survives what you went through." Ethan tried to sit up, but his body still felt different. Stronger, faster, and yet something else. Something deep inside him throbbed with unfamiliar energy. I feel strange," he admitted. "Like I'm not entirely myself." Valara nodded, her fingers brushing against his hand. "You carry my blood now. My strength flows through you. It is not fully human, but it is still you. Do not fear it. You are still alive because you are brave, because you care. That is what makes you strong. Ethan swallowed. He had never considered himself brave. On Earth he had been ordinary, unnoticed. But now, in this alien palace, with the life of a princess intertwined with his own, he felt something he had never known. Purpose. "I don't understand," he said softly. "Why me? Why not one of your soldiers or one of your warriors?" Valara's lips curved faintly, a smile tinged with sadness. "Because you are human, and human courage is different. You do not fight for honor or glory or power. You fight because it matters, because someone you care about needs you. That is rare, even among my people." The room was quiet for a long moment, the hum of the palace outside blending with the soft thrum of her energy. Ethan felt warmth rise in his chest, warmth he had never known. He reached for her hand and she did not pull away. Do you trust me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked into her eyes, into centuries of loneliness and battles, into the weight of a crown that had never felt like a choice but a burden, and he realized that he did trust her, Gwenel, completely. "Yes," he said, his voice trembling. "I do." Her smile deepened slightly and she leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Then our bond is complete," she said. "Your life is mine as mine is yours. We are linked now in blood and in spirit. Nothing can take that from us, not enemies, not time, not even death." Ethan tried to imagine what this meant. He had been a simple human, a technician fixing machines. Now he was tied to an immortal princess bound in ways he barely understood, but with her beside him he felt he could face anything: the rebellion, the nobles, the empire itself. Valara stood and extended her hand to him. "Come, there is much to prepare. The palace may be quiet now, but threats remain. You must learn to survive in this world, not just for yourself, but for me, for us." Ethan took her hand, the warmth of her touch anchoring him. As he rose, he felt strength he had never known. His body, his mind, and his heart had changed. He was no longer just human. He was part of something larger, something eternal, and the fear he had carried for a lifetime was replaced by determination. Outside, the city still glimmered under the twin suns. Fires had been put out, rebels scattered, but danger lingered like a shadow on the horizon. Yet Ethan felt ready. He would face it all, fight, survive, and protect her, because she had saved him. She had chosen him, and now he would live, not as a pawn, not as a victim, but as the human who had survived what should have killed him, standing beside the alien vampire princess who had claimed him as her own. And in that moment, he understood something profound. Survival was not just about living. It was about standing for something, fighting for someone, and never letting go of what mattered most. Even when the stars themselves seemed against you, the war had come, and the Vrylok Empire shook under its own chaos. Rebel factions, enraged by Valara's choice, had gathered armies, ships, and mercenaries from distant systems. Fires lit the skies and the air was thick with tension. Every corner of the empire whispered of betrayal and battle. Ethan stood beside Valara on the balcony of her crimson palace. He no longer felt like the terrified engineer captured from Earth. His body had grown stronger, faster, sharper. Every movement carried a weight he had never known. Every thought sharpened by the bond they shared. And yet fear still lingered. Not of the enemy, but for her. "They are gathering fleets," he said quietly, his eyes scanning the horizon where ships glinted like deadly stars. "We can't let them take you." Valara placed a hand on his shoulder. "I will not fall. Not while you are here." Her voice was calm, but the crimson glow in her eyes betrayed the fire within. "We fight not just for power, but for what we choose to protect. And I choose you, Ethan." He swallowed hard, feeling warmth in his chest. He had faced fear before, but now, standing beside her, he felt the courage of someone who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. "Then we fight together," he said firmly. The battles came like storms. Ships collided in crimson explosions. Fleets tore each other apart in space, and armies clashed on the surface of distant planets. Ethan fought beside her, his human instincts now fused with alien strength. Energy blades sang through the air, and he moved with precision he had never known before. Once, during a critical skirmish, Valara was surrounded by a squad of elite rebels. Her hands were a blur, her energy blades cutting through weapons and armor, but they were too many. Without thinking, Ethan leaped forward, throwing himself between her and the attackers. He blocked strikes, deflected blows, and fought with a ferocity he never imagined he possessed. She glanced at him in surprise, her crimson eyes widening. For a heartbeat she saw not a human, but a warrior her equal in courage. Together they became a storm no enemy could withstand. Side by side, human and alien, they cut through the chaos. After the battle, as the skies burned with the wreckage of ships, Valara took Ethan's hand. "You have grown," she said softly, her crimson eyes glimmering with pride and something deeper. "Not just in strength, but in spirit. You remind me why I chose humanity over fear, why I chose you." Ethan looked at her, feeling a fierce warmth in his chest. "And you remind me why I fight," he said. "Not for glory, not for survival, but for us, for what we've built together." Valara smiled faintly, leaning close so their foreheads touched. "Even in war, love gives us strength. Even in chaos, hope is our weapon." The Empire was changing, and so were they. Each battle, each victory, each shared glance in the midst of destruction brought them closer. The nobles and generals who had doubted him watched in awe as he fought not as a human pawn, but as a partner, a protector, and someone whose courage could inspire even the oldest warriors. When the last of the rebel fleets fell, and the skies cleared of fire, the twin suns rose together. They shone on a world scarred by war but alive with possibility. Valara and Ethan stood atop the highest tower, hand in hand, their hearts beating together in a rhythm forged in blood, fire, and trust. Ethan realized then that their bond had done more than save them in battle. It had changed the Empire itself. The hearts of soldiers and citizens shifted. Fear turned into respect, respect into loyalty. And as the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, he knew one thing with certainty. No matter how fierce the war, how deep the betrayal, or how dark the night, he would face it all. Not alone, but beside the alien vampire princess who had chosen him, who had shared her blood, and who had given him a reason to become more than human. Because together, they were unstoppable, a human and an immortal, united against all who would try to tear them apart. The Empire was quiet now, though scars of war still marked its cities and skies. Fires had been extinguished, rebels defeated, and the once chaotic streets now hummed with cautious life. The twin suns rose together over the horizon, casting crimson and gold light across towers and spires. It was the beginning of something new, a dawn that promised hope where there had only been fear. Ethan stood at the balcony of the Crimson Palace, overlooking the city. He had grown stronger, wiser, and more certain of himself than ever before. His hands rested on the stone railing, but his heart was alive with something far heavier than any battlefield: love, loyalty, and the quiet courage that had guided him through every danger. Valara joined him, her pale skin glowing softly in the light. She wore her crown lightly, as if its weight had lost all meaning beside the bond they shared. Her crimson eyes softened as they found his. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "I have survived battles I never imagined, faced enemies I could never have understood, and yet I would do it all again. Because it brought me here with you." Valara smiled, a rare warmth lighting her features. "You are more than I ever imagined. You are not just a human, Ethan. You are my equal, my partner, my heart, and you've changed this empire simply by being yourself." He turned toward her, feeling a wave of emotion he had never known. "You saved me, and in doing so, you made me stronger than I could ever be alone. You gave me life when I should have died. You gave me purpose, Valara, and I will not waste it." She reached out, taking both his hands in hers. "And I will not waste what we have, Ethan. This empire, our people, our lives. We will build something different now, something that is ours, together." The twin suns rose higher, their light spilling across the palace and the city below. The people, seeing their leaders, a human and a princess bound in blood and trust, began to whisper among themselves. Stories of courage, hope, and love spread across the empire. The impossible bond had become a symbol, not of weakness but of strength. Ethan felt the power within him, the bond that had made him more than human. And he realized it was not just a gift from her. It was a choice. Every moment he had survived, every battle he had faced, every act of trust and courage had brought him here. He was not just the chosen consort. He was a partner in every sense. Valara leaned closer, her forehead touching his. "When I first pointed at you," she whispered, "they called it madness. They said a human could never stand by me, let alone survive my world." Ethan smiled faintly, his heart steady and full. And now? Now, she said, her voice soft but certain. They call it destiny. Together they stood in silence, feeling the bond that connected them in ways no one else could understand. It was not power, nor fear, nor ambition that had shaped their path. It was trust, courage, and a choice. A choice to see each other, to believe in each other, and to face everything together. The Empire would heal slowly. There would be challenges, whispers of dissent, and tests of loyalty. But for the first time in centuries, the people knew their leaders were not just rulers. They were proof that life, love, and humanity could shine even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. Ethan turned his eyes to Valara, feeling the weight of eternity in her gaze. Whatever comes next, he said softly, we face it together. She nodded, letting her hand rest in his. Together, she echoed. The twin suns climbed higher, casting their eternal light over the world they had saved, over the empire they would rule, and over a love that had changed everything. And for the first time, both human and alien felt something deeper than power or fear. They felt hope, trust, and the quiet certainty that no matter how vast the universe, they had each other, and in that moment the eternal dawn belonged to them, the human who had survived, and the alien vampire princess who had chosen him.